Big Sills, welcome aboard. How about Playoff Jimmy? Jesus criminy, man. I cannot believe when I tune on a television show and I see Big Game Jimmy. Man, does that guy blow you away? What an absolutely amazing leader. Pat Riley, look at the people Pat Riley, we said this yesterday, has tied himself to. Magic Johnson. He really didn't have the guy in New York. What you really love about Riley and how he runs an organization, let me show you how great that dude is. So would we not agree that the Lakers and Showtime were one of the greatest teams in the history of sports? What does he do? He goes to New York and turns his team into a half-court offense. And he wins games because he really doesn't have anybody outside of Ewing on that team. And he turns himself into a half-court coach. Then he goes to Miami. Mickey Aronson gives him the reins. He wins an NBA championship there. He gets Eric Spoelstra. He turns him into the best coach in the NBA. And look who he ties himself to. Dwayne Wade, Shaquille, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and now Jimmy Butler. Dude, this guy's unbelievable. Pat Riley can identify leadership. It's a damn shame that people in Philadelphia with that Sixer program can't identify shit. Dude, do you see what Josh Harris is now barking about now, the new owner of the Commanders? This guy doesn't own the team, 2 weeks now? And he's barking about a new stadium. Come on, man. Really? You just had a colossal meltdown on Sunday with your team. You look for a scapegoat, so you fight. You know Doc Rivers is now the leading candidate to get the Bucs job? You know Giannis is now petitioning to have Doc Rivers as the head coach in Milwaukee? Giannis wants – would you be shocked if Doc goes up to Milwaukee and wins an NBA title? I wouldn't. Giannis wants the guy. I don't think there's any coincidence to that. Giannis wants to have Doc Rivers as the coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. Dude. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Josh Harris now wants a new stadium. Dude, this is about culture. Hey, you know what's crazy about that Heat team? I can't name the guys on that basketball team. How many undrafted guys are on that basketball team that you've never heard of? And they just win. What a culture, dude. We talk about that with the Eagles and how the Eagles are so protective of that culture. I see why now. Man, it is hard to build that culture. It's hard to win like that. It really is. Hey, what LeBron has done and going and winning in these other places, I think has to be also something celebrated. Because you just can't skip on pods like that and go win championships in 3 different places when you know some of those cultures were absolutely shitty. I mean, look at it. The Cleveland Cadavers. Remember that's what we used to call the Cavaliers? The Cadavers. LeBron elevated that franchise now to being $1 billion. It was a joke, dude. Outside of the ELO years, it was a joke. LeBron elevated the Cavaliers for Gilbert and the family. He elevated it. Totally elevated it. Look what the Sixers are. Man, what a shit show. What a damn shame. And now Josh Harris is telling Commander fans, hey, we need a new stadium. Of course you do. Put it on the taxpayers' money. How about winning some games for us, dude? How about making some right decisions? Man, if I'm a Washington Commander fan and I see how that guy's run the Philadelphia 76ers, what's going to be the difference between him and Daniel Snyder? What, Josh Harris will be more of a bullshit artist than what Daniel Snyder was? 2 shitty owners. 2 shitty owners. And by the way, this is nothing personal. I don't know Josh Harris from a can of paint. I'm talking about the way he runs his Sixer team. I'm just going to assume he's going to run the Commanders the same way. Nothing personal, dude. You run that organization like a shit show. You made Philadelphia 76er fans tank and accept it and talked about some sort of stupid process. Look at the process here. How terrible is that? You absolutely bullshitted people to a point where they believed you. Man, culture's everything in sports. It really is. It was something interesting today. Something interesting that I heard on Birds 365. Marcus Hayes, the writer for the Inquirer, was on with the guys. And not to go exactly with what he said here, but I'm going to paraphrase it. The way he came off, it made it seem that Nick Sirianni, and we're talking culture here, really doesn't understand the Philadelphia Eagle culture. And I would have a topic here for you. How important is Sirianni in the success of the Eagles? How important to the success of the Philadelphia Eagles do you think Nick Sirianni is? How important is Nick to the culture? And was Marcus right when he said that Nick really doesn't understand the culture that well yet? I thought it was pretty interesting. How important is he in this whole process for success for the Eagles? Wonder how because listen, there is no question. And don't let anybody tell you this, that Nick Sirianni has any kind of say when it comes to personnel or when it comes to hiring coaches. He has zero. And I agree with Marcus. He has zero say in it. Now, I would give you this. I think Nick probably has a little bit more autonomy because there's been great success the last 2 years, especially since the 2-5 start. Okay? JM goes, Sirianni could nail his shoes to the door and we wouldn't skip a beat. I completely agree with you, JM. He's a widget. You know, Tone and I were talking about this. Howie Roseman is the maestro. Do you know who Nick Sirianni is? He's the fifth dude in the tuba section. Remember what he said during Super Bowl week? Hey, man, when I got the Eagle job, I had to introduce myself to the coaching staff. It was already in place. He had nothing to do with that, and he still doesn't. You don't really think he had anything to do with the picking of the coordinators, do you? Absolutely not. How important do you – I think it's pretty interesting culture. And it's really an eye-opener. And when Marcus from the Inquirer brings this up, I've been saying this to you guys the whole time. I'm going to tell you what I think Nick Sirianni's importance is. Neil goes, nothing. No. I do not believe Nick Sirianni has no place in the culture for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's where I disagree with Marcus. Because I'm going to tell you what I think his importance is. You see, he's a Pied Piper. Howie and the owners set the culture. You know what Nick Sirianni's great at? And you know why maybe Marcus has questions about whether or not he understands totally the Eagle culture? Here's what I say he does. He goes along to get along. He's not going to make waves like Doug did. If Doug Peterson can be fired, Nick Sirianni can be. This is why I told you last year when we had that topic. You don't think if Nick shits the bed, Howie's not going to fire that guy? You see the difference between the Philadelphia 76ers and the Eagles? Nick Sirianni could take a team to the NFC title game, or better yet, win a Super Bowl. Your resume and place in that organization is the fifth seat in the tuba section. You're part of the orchestra. That's it. Nothing more. You have a role. We have a culture, you will follow, or as they say, to go along, you get along. Doug didn't want to do that. That's why the owner went like this. Dude, we said it yesterday. You don't really believe that Jeffrey Lurie wanted to fire Doug Peterson, do you? But when he realized that Doug wasn't going to go along to get along, he couldn't have that. As much respect as he had for Doug, to get along, you go along. Do you know when this first popped up? This is why many of you and people even at the NovaCare Center come to this program every day. You know when that popped up? Is when Frank Reich was on this program and he recommended Sirianni. But he told Sirianni this, hey, they got a way of doing things there. And if you don't fall in line, you'll be on the same unemployment line as Doug Peterson. That's how it works. That's why the Eagles, it doesn't matter if it's Andy Reid, Chip Kelly, Doug Peterson, Nick Sirianni. They got a way of doing shit. That couldn't have been on display more this weekend, or excuse me, this morning, when Marcus from the Inquirer was talking and said, I don't think that Nick really gets the culture, and he still needs a culture lesson. Yeah, but the one thing that he is doing, Marcus, that Doug didn't do, he's going along with it and getting along. And he's going to grow into the culture. That's why the Eagles are cool with him. That's why the Eagles like him. The process now is very different now than with Doug. I spent months long interviewing candidates, Sirianni's. Hey, I would say, D, well, the Sirianni conversation didn't really pop up until Frank Reich and the owner were talking about when they were in the midst of trading Carson Wentz to Indianapolis. That's when that whole thing popped up. And they recommended Sirianni. Sirianni parachuted in from nowhere, except the fact that they respect Frank Reich's opinion. He said Frank will go along with the system. That's why Frank is revered. Frank was going to be the offensive coordinator. We know that. He said it right here. He said it right here on this program. Nick Sirianni is important in doing this. The message from above. Because, again, Howie can't walk into the locker room and relay the message. Nick Sirianni's strength is not coaching. That high school shit he does, whatever, man. Okay? The high school bullshit, come on. It's how he expresses what they're looking for in that organization. Okay? What's up, C? Sills, would you consider bringing back Wentz as a backup? No, I don't need that nightmare. No, I would not. Why? Why walk back? I'd rather have Foles. I'd rather have Foles than Carson Wentz right now. Carson needs to be on his own. Marcus Haynes actually had a very insightful interview. He has a history with the franchise to glean relevant. No, hey, JM, that's why I thought it was one of the most interesting takes that I had heard anybody from the Philly. He was very to the point. I don't really think Nick knows the culture very well. He's not a really good culture guy. I'm paraphrasing it, but that was my takeaway. I was like, holy shit. Yeah, but he's a really good communicator and understanding of this. He's not going to ruffle feathers. But it did tell you this. Nick has no say in that organization. According to Marcus, he has no say. It's zero say. He has suggestions. I would make this point to you. I think probably Jalen Hurts has more say. I'd say Hurts has more say. That's why that culture is so important to that owner and that GM. It's so important. Dude, just by watching, and by watching Daryl Morey go through that charade, and you saw and you listened to him talking, And then you see how the Eagles operate and how the Eagles do things on a daily basis. You know, there's one thing that Howie Roseman does do, and what he's been better at since he came out of the broom closet when they stuffed his ass in there on Chip Kelly. You know what he has done? He's empowered more people. The Sixers don't empower enough people. I don't want to hear James. Hey, and for the record, okay, and for the record, do you don't really believe that that organization gives a shit whether Darius Slay likes that Matt Patricia's in the building? You don't really think that they run that the way the Sixers do, that James Harden had something to do with the firing of Doc Rivers? Do you really think any player in that building, maybe Jalen Hurts, could actually walk into Howie Roseman's office and go like this? You know, I don't really like Tracy Rocker as my D-line coach. We need to make a move here. Man, you know what? He's not putting us in positions to win. You don't really think that that organization would tolerate that that player would be cut or moved or traded. James Harden walks into Daryl Morey's office, and again, that shitty answer he gave after a blowout instead of look at the character that you had with the Sixers on Sunday. Joel Embiid throwing the entire team under a bus, and then you had James Harden throwing the coach under the bus. What a great tandem you got there. Man, I would never want that on my foxhole. Those two guys throwing the team, and then the other guy throwing the coach. You lit the whole goddamn thing on fire, bro. You're not going to see that in Philadelphia with the Eagles. That ain't going to happen because there's a culture there, and they protect that culture. Okay? They protect that culture. Dude, this is not about letting the inmates run the asylum. Not that kind of stupid talk. Not that kind of ignorant conversation. I'm talking about you don't let your employees run your direction, your program, or nor do you let the media influence you. You think Pat Riley sits around letting players tell him, hey, Eric Spoelstra, you're hiring a video dude? He's the best coach in the NBA. You got to have faith in the process, a real process. You see, the Eagles have a real process. The Sixers have a shit process because they put it in the hands of the wrong people. People who are protecting their resumes and players. Players should not be running your organization. That's why you play, you coach, and you're the GM. There's a reason there's titles. Everybody wants a piece of their own, I get it, their own direction. Sixers are the Chargers of the NBA. Yeah, well, anytime that hey, there's no question. Spanos family. You know what's crazy? Tom Telesco's a good GM. He's a good GM. He puts a lot of people on the field, but you know what? He goes to marching orders too. He has to listen to shitty ownership. Hey, you could be a great general manager or a great coach. If you got a shitty owner, you're not going nowhere. How many times have you seen places where by the way, Bruce Arians, speaking of Bruce Arians and how Bruce Arians does and how he runs a program, he's going to join us at 5:30 Eastern time. We're going to talk to him a little bit about the RPO system, and we're going to get his thoughts on the Buccaneers, the organization, Jason Light. You know, people are telling me, and John McMullen's, I love John. I love when he comes on the program. He thought Shane Steichen's a great play caller. Well, I'm going to ask a true play caller and a Super Bowl winning head coach who was a play caller, if the RPO is a play calling system or more of a design system and the quarterback has more decision-making in it, or if that's play calling. Why don't we talk to a guy that's got 4 Super Bowl rings? We'll do that in hour number 3 at 5:30 Eastern. Okay? And we'll get his thoughts. I'll get his thoughts also on Jalen Hurts. So that'll be there. We're gonna do my predictions on the division winners and also wild card teams here in a second. But just to expand a little more here, Sirianni has no say in that organization. I agree with Marcus on that. But he does have a place in it. All ownership cares about is being relevant. They don't care about winning. like they claim to. And you know what's crazy about what Tone just said? All you have to do is look at their actions. You know what? If you muted the 76er organization and just went by their actions, you would call them liars. If you had the sound down and you just watched them for the last 7 years, all of a sudden you turn the volume up, you'd go, you're a liar. Nothing you said right there is true. Nothing. Nothing. Nothing you promised season ticket holders, fans of the team, nothing since you've owned that team have you come through on. Nothing. Except getting a new building, which right now you're now starting to campaign to get a new building for the Commanders. You understand something about getting a building for an owner. It's generational wealth. It increases their wealth when they get new buildings. You made Josh Harris even richer by giving him Wells Fargo, and he gave you shit. The process now is very different than with Doug. Sirianni spent pre-draft months interviewing candidates. Absolutely a lie. Sirianni is through. Howie not spending months interviewing coaches, especially pre-draft. That is an absolute, unbelievably not true comment. Absolutely not a true comment. Sirianni, if he interviewed candidates, it was Howie's list of teams that he wanted to talk to certain people. You are so out of your mind if you think Nick Sirianni has a say in that building when it comes to hiring coaches or coordinators or the type of defense they're going to run. Absolutely not true. And for the record, how many people think that the organization took the play calling duties away from Sirianni after the 2-5 start? How many people thought that they did and took that away from him? You know, so, like, wait a minute. Are you under really the guys that a brand new head coach who's 2-5 and his ass is on the line and people are questioning whether or not he's a good coach, just said, hey, why don't you do it? Mid-season? Okay. Yeah. Dude, he was on the rails to be a one-and-done guy if that thing continued. But people are going like, yeah, Sirianni, he came up with the decision on his own. Never had experience in his entire life. Hey, Joseph goes, I do. Okay. Okay. You guys let all these little tidbits just follow through. He told you when he took the job in Philadelphia, he had to introduce himself. He told you that in January. He didn't know the coaching staff. Usually when a new coach gets a job, don't you think he gets to bring his own coaches in? Don't you get it? The majority of the coaches that they have hired have all been tethered to Doug Peterson and Frank Reich. All of that tree there is through Frank and Doug. Mike McCoy. All them guys all work together. Howie likes that tree. He likes the Doug Peterson tree. He likes those guys because you know why? They're designers of offense. They put boutique offenses together because that's Frank's forte. They got all that shit from Frank. Hey, again, there's a place in that organization for Sirianni. I'm not saying, but how many times have you seen Howie Roseman at the front door of the locker room in a big game when he's congratulating all of his guys when they walk in, including the head coach? How many GMs? The only other guy I've ever seen do that is Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the only other guy, GM, I've ever seen congratulating guys so that everybody knows. Remember that Indianapolis? Was it the Indianapolis game? He's out front of the locker room congratulating everybody. Great job, coach. Way to go. Way to go. Hey, guys, brought Sue and Linville Joe. He wanted everyone to know it was him. He wants everyone to know it's him. Nothing wrong with that, man. And by the way, I think the owner doesn't let it get too out of hand. I think that's his role in this. Football creates a lot of egos. and it could tear you apart. And that's what the magic of Bob Kraft was, is keeping that thing on the rails as long as he did. I can't believe Bob Kraft kept that thing on the rails for 20 years. I really can't. I can't believe Kraft kept that thing going for 20 years. Cannot believe it. Okay? The Eagles run that organization, and one more time, Doug Peterson's the fifth dude in the tuba section. Howie's the orchestra guy. He's the maestro. He's the guy with the sticks. Points to you. Points to you. Points to you. Which means you're all replaceable. Every person in that organization is replaceable, including Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson. Okay? That's why he's probably the best maestro right now in the NFL, maybe in sports. I'd give the Rays as the best organization for the amount of money that they spend. I think the Rays are probably the best organization. Andrew Silverman and those guys, and Andrew Friedman, who set the cement there for the Rays. That's a great organization down there. Okay? It is. It's a great – the Rays are incredible. $65 million payroll. They beat teams with $200 million payrolls on a consistent basis. It's remarkable. It's talent. It's recruiting. It's culture. Again, another place with culture. Okay? So, listen, it's not a slam on Nick. What coaching does Nick do? Jump on park benches? Give you crazy faces at the press conferences? What impact does you think he has? Keeping the locker room? The locker room right now is in a good place. Why is the locker room in a good place in Philly? Because you're winning. There's been no adversity yet. 2-5 has been the biggest adversity that the Eagles have had, and a little bit the injury at the end of last year. Now you got a little tiny bit more of an adversity because you lost the Super Bowl, but that's not tragic. The game's tragic how you lost it, but you still come from a place where, get this, you were on the podium. So you build on that. It's a building platform, being in the Super Bowl. You keep it going. And the reason the Eagles will keep it going, NFC's down, culture in the building, everyone knows their role. That's the key here. This is why Doug got out of hand. The Eagles were so right to fire him. They were so right. Doug Peterson got out of hand. Seth Joyner said it, man, on our program numerous times. Doug didn't have enough say in the building. He wanted more say, so he kicked the can down the road. Eagles didn't want to bend. Get this. The Eagles told a Super Bowl winning coach, and this goes back again to Marcus talking to Birds 365 this morning. This is exactly why you look at Sirianni and go, he's the perfect coach for the Eagles. He's not going to ruffle feathers, where a lot of coaches would. You can't bring in Lincoln Riley. He would have been a train wreck too. Look at the culture. Look at what Chip, you know why Chip sucks so bad at the end? You know, he did have a winning record. Do you know why Chip sucks so bad? He tried to create this imaginary culture that didn't exist in the building, and all the things that Jeffrey Lurie knows. Boy, I'll tell you what, I'm more shocked that they got out of that than out of the 4-win culture. Seriously, I'm more shocked how fast they got out of the Doug or the Chip Kelly era than they did out of the Peterson era. Even with the quarterback salary, I'm more shocked with that because, man, he ruined everything. Getting rid of Shady, getting rid of really good ball players, having a philosophy of running 100 billion plays, not understanding the NFL, not understanding how you manage a roster in the NFL. There's only 53 guys. He knew none of that, nor did he care to know that. He didn't care. They gave him all the hats. The owner wanted to try something new, and it blew up in his face, and he said, never again. And that's why everyone's going around now talking about how great it is at the NovaCare Center. You know why? This is designed. They were never good. The Philadelphia Eagles, as long as Jeffrey Lurie owns this team, will never let that thing go sideways like that ever again. You may not win games, but it's not going to be because of shitty ownership and shitty management like you have in Philadelphia with the Sixers. That, or with Chip, that's not going to happen. That is not going to happen. So I thought it was an interesting conversation. See, there's a role for Nick, though. Hey, Nick, we need you to express this opinion of ours. Is Nick a mouthpiece? Yeah. Nick Sirianni's a mouthpiece. But it's okay. Look what you have in Dallas. How would you like to be a mouthpiece in Dallas and be Mike McCarthy and lose? Okay? And as you keep going along, see, Nick's smart, though. Nick's smart. You know what he does? Because the more he goes along, the more they ask him his opinion, the more he builds his equity up in the organization, the more they trust him, the more they respect him, the more he becomes a viable part of the front office. He's building. That's why when Marcus is saying he needs a lesson in culture, well, at the end of the day, you know what he's doing? Nick Sirianni is building his equity with the Eagles right now by going along. You can't be a play caller anymore. Okay. Hey, we have to hire this offensive coordinator. Okay. And you have to coach him. Okay. How many coaches do that? None. Tony Dungy was fired in Tampa Bay because he wanted to keep Clyde Christensen. The Glazers wanted Clyde Christensen gone. Thought that they had Warner Welcome out. They wanted a brand new coaching direction because Tony couldn't get the team over the hump. I think this was after the NFC Championship game that got beat by the Rams, the St. Louis Rams. I was there. They wanted a brand new offensive coaching staff because they felt that the offensive coaching staff wasn't good enough to put that team over the hump to win a Super Bowl. Tony didn't want to fire him. He didn't want to fire the coaching staff he had. Well, the defensive guys, that's why they kept some of the coaches on the defensive side of the football. Raheem Morris was on that side of the football. Okay? I mean, you had some of the best defensive-minded coaches. Tony went like this. I'm not firing Clyde Christensen and some of the guys we have in our staff on the offensive side. The Glazers wanted a whole new, and Tony was fired. Tony was fired. That's how Tony Dungy got fired in Tampa. Okay? He got fired in Tampa because he wanted to go against the Glazers' culture. And a lot of organizations that win want to do things a certain way. Once Doug started winning, Doug wanted to do shit his way. It's human nature. Doug Peterson winning the Super Bowl caused him to overestimate his value. Completely true. It always does, though. But therefore, he tried to skip steps on the organization's equity. That's right. Completely true. But what Doug has done now, Doug has shown that where he wanted to take the Eagles, he's now taking and picking up for a train wreck of a coach in Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, in an organization. Where do you think he's learned all that? He took all that organizational expertise that he saw in how the Eagles run it, and he's now putting it now in place in Jacksonville. The only difference is this, is that Trent Baalke doesn't have the equity that Howie Roseman has with the owner. It's Doug. That's Doug's ship. That's run more like Kansas City now down in Jacksonville than in what. And see, that's what Doug wanted. Doug wanted to run the Eagles like Andy runs the Kansas City Chiefs. That's probably why at the end, Kansas City, that's how they probably got Andy Reid, is that Andy Reid probably, with all his winning, he wanted more equity. That happens, man. And that's why right now, Nick Sirianni's in a pretty interesting place in his career. So you saying interview process has no impact? No, not at all. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the interview process is, if you're under the guys that you think that Nick picked these guys to interview him, and at the end of the day, he picks which guy he wants, you're out of your mind. You know what he is? He's a headhunter for the general manager when it comes to coaches. He's a headhunter. Well, I interviewed these 6 guys, and this is my takeaway with this guy. Now, here's where Nick's opinion comes in. Say Nick interviewed 6 coordinators, offense and defense. Oh, wait a minute. So to go with D's thoughts here, so you really think Nick Sirianni wanted to bring a guy in that one of his players hated? If he's such a player's coach, why would he bring in a guy like Matt Patricia that one of his players hated? Really? I thought Sirianni and Slay had a good relationship. So if I have a good relationship with you and I'm sitting there talking to you and I start dating your girlfriend or your ex-girlfriend and you really loved this, okay, and then all of a sudden you really hated it and it was a horrific divorce, horrific, and I start dating your ex-wife or your ex-girlfriend, you're all right with that? Yeah, I want you to meet Susie. I know you know her. Yeah, okay. Doug won the bowl. Debo, didn't matter because Doug wanted to change the Super Bowl was important to the Philadelphia Eagles because you know what it did? It gave Howie the equity that he needed to fire Doug. Doug thought what Tone said. Doug Peterson winning the Super Bowl Doug thought he was going to have the equity to have more power than Howie. All it did was it strengthened Howie, not Doug. Doug's the widget. He's the 5th dude in the tuba section. He'll always be. By the way, 2 guys have left the building. You know, Chip's not done that bad a job at UCLA. It's been pretty good. Chip's winning at UCLA. Andy's winning in Kansas City. Doug's winning in Jacksonville. And the Eagles are running their operation the way they want to run it. It's like everybody's happy. But you're not changing the Philadelphia Eagle culture because you won a Super Bowl. That's not going to work. They tried that experiment with Chip. They're never walking down. Yeah, winning that Super Bowl didn't strengthen Doug Peterson. It strengthened Howie. Howie got more out of that. Hey, am I right when I say this? Howie got more out of that Super Bowl than Doug did. Do you believe if Doug would have been patient, he would have eventually got the equity he wanted with the Eagles? Yeah. Don't you see here? This is what, yes, Tone, this is what Frank told Nick. Hey, win, be patient. And to what Patricia has no say. Sure, okay, right. So listen what Vet said. Patricia has no say, at least he's a water boy. Really? So you would bring a guy in to upset your locker room for no reason, right, Vet? Makes sense. Vet thing has no say. Then why would you bring him in? Why would you hire him? To piss off Slay? Okay, Vet, if I'm going to take your take there, why would you bring him in then if he has no say? If Matt Patricia has no say, you brought him in to piss your player off? Is the only other avenue you're talking about here. According to Vet, he has no say. Well, so then Howie Roseman, Jeffrey Lurie, and Nick Sirianni, according to him, brought a guy in to piss their player off. Interesting take, Vet. He doesn't have any say. He's just a dude. Then why hire him? So do you just hire to hire? What do you think? This is the Peace Corps? I mean, what? What do you think? Here, and to what Tone asked, and what D asked. Here's the influence. When those guys were looking at all those coordinators, here's where Nick builds his. This is where Nick builds his trust with the owners. Hey, I think, in the best interest. I think this guy here, Johnson, I think we have to go with him. Jalen loves him really a lot. Coaching staff loves him. Everybody in the locker room loves him. Then you talk about other coordinators. Frank Reich was going to be the coordinator, though. What's funny about that? He's a defensive assistant. Whatever, Vet. You're right. They brought a guy who's a nobody in for nothing just to piss Slay off. Hey, great take. Okay, hey, Johnson was never going to be the coordinator. Frank had the job. Frank had the job. He said it here. Frank was going to be the offensive coordinator if he didn't get the Carolina Panther job. He said it. Johnson was never going to not. He was the second dude. Why? Well, Howie and the owner love Frank Reich. They love that guy. He knows the game. So, how Nick builds his equity, like Tone says, the more you go along, the more your calculated decisions. Hey, I think it's in the best interest maybe that we give the play calling over to Shane Steichen instead, you being the play caller. Okay, no problem. Let's see if there's a different direction. And that's how, see, Doug would have fought that. Nick's not. Nick has no place to fight that. Now he's got a little bit more. But Nick's got to be careful how he fights that. So Sean Desai, you think was a Nick Sirianni hire. How? Where in your right mind would you think that? They look at certain guys and go, okay, this is a guy that fits our culture. See, you got to fit the culture. In fact, Doug preferred Wentz over Hurts. Howie preferred Hurts. Glad Howie won. Doug's the fifth dude in the tuba section. Is because Howie won. Howie was always going to win. And don't tell me that they knew Wentz was the guy. They got 2 first-round draft choices last year to get a quarterback in this year's draft. You make it sound like that was predetermined when they fired Doug. That is not true. You know it, and I know it. That's not totally accurate. It's revised history. At that point when they fired Doug, they didn't know that quarterback was going to be where he is right now. That is not true. That is not true. As a matter of fact, this time last year, we were questioning whether Hurts was the guy. Don't revise history. It's not true. It's not a true statement. I'm glad he chose him. Dude, this time last year, the Eagles hadn't chosen him yet. Howie had built up equity in the draft to get 2 first-rounders for a reason. And it wasn't to take a safety or a defensive tackle. I thought that conversation this morning told us even more about how strong the culture is. By the way, don't be offended. Guys, don't be offended that Sirianni doesn't have any say in the building. He's building his equity up. Don't you want to build it up? Have him build it up. By the way, your last 3 coaches that you have had, 4 coaches really, have all been pretty successful. Now, one was a college coach and will always be a college coach, and he should stay at the college level, and I don't believe he'll ever get another opportunity to coach in the NFL ever again, Chip Kelly. So he's a college coach. He's got great success in the college game. Oregon and now UCLA. Hey, Saban's a college coach. Doug's having great success now. Andy's having miraculous success. These guys, it's all good. But those guys were the 5th tuba player or the 3rd dude in the violin section. They have no say in that organization. I love it when I hear people go on the air and say that they really believe that Nick Sirianni has some sort of equity in the building. He's building it, but to sit there and say he picks assistant coaches or he has anything to do with scheme or he has anything to do with play calling, that's what makes it even more crazy when people think that RPO system, that Shane Steichen was some sort of brilliant play caller. I can't wait to get Bruce Arians on in hour number 3 at 5:30 and let him explain what the RPO is and how different it is to a 7-step drop quarterback. It's more progression reading in the 7-step. Howie wanted Jefferson. Doug chose Rager. That has a lot to do with Doug getting fired. So you think a draft choice has a lot to do with him getting fired after winning a Super Bowl. Really, I don't. Zero. Who chose Andre Dillard then? He was a freaking bust too. Who chose Andre Dillard? Jeff Stoutland? Why wasn't he fired? Who picked Andre Dillard? He didn't even get to a second contract. Who got him? Who drafted Derek Barnett? 7-year GI Bill that guy's on. I've never seen a guy get more of a scholarship than Derek Barnett. Why is that guy on the roster? Seriously, he's the Jalen Reagor of the Eagles. This guy's got more penalties than sacks. Doug wanted more power. Doug wanted to run the shop that he's running. No. Doug wanted to run the Eagles the way Andy runs the Eagles. You know, Brett Veach. You really think Brett Veach has more say? Why do you think that Andy Reid had John Dorsey fired? Do you guys remember? John Dorsey's the guy that brought in Mahomes. He's the guy that went out and traded for Alex Smith. He's the guy that recommended that they bring all that talent. Travis Kelce, that's all John Dorsey. But once that started to get to a point where they were butting heads, and Andy won that Super Bowl, here's where it's different in Kansas City than it was different in Philly for Andy. Andy went to Clark Hunt and had John Dorsey fired. John Dorsey's such a good personnel guy, the Browns hired him. You know, the majority of the Browns players that are on that team pre-Deshaun Watson are because of John Dorsey. All them guys. But John Dorsey can't get along with head coaches because you know why? He doesn't want anybody dipping their beak into his pond. Okay? And him becomes adversarial. See, Howie started getting pissed off at Doug because Doug wanted to run his own ship. And get this, if you're an owner like Jeffrey Lurie, you understand that. You helped create that. But see, what Tone said, Doug winning the Super Bowl was arguably the worst thing in the world happened to him because he wasn't patient enough after that. You see, it's one thing for Belichick. Belichick had two things going in his favor. He didn't have a GM, and he had Brady. Now that he doesn't have Brady, he's losing Belichick because he's not winning. You got the owner of the New England Patriots saying that you had a great draft taking 2 kickers. He's setting the trap door for him. Belichick will not, he'll be forced out. Same way Don Shula was forced out. You know why? They'll hire or find a guy who will replace him that everyone will be comfortable with. You can't replace Bill Belichick with Shane Steichen. You replace him with Jimmy Johnson. I'm not saying Jimmy, I'm talking like when Jimmy took over for Landry. Look who Jimmy Johnson took over for. The only guy that could take over for Tom Landry and Don Shula. You understand that. The only guy. That's why in Philly, when everyone went, Shane Steichen taking over for Doug. But who was Doug? Who was Andy Reid? You know, Chip Kelly probably had the most equity of all the coaching hires in the last 23 years that Jeffrey Lurie has had because everyone wanted that coach. Everyone went like this. Dude, I look back on all your comments about Doug Peterson's hiring. Great revised history by some of you there also. Nobody was a fan of Doug Peterson's hiring. Nobody was a fan of Andy Reid's hiring. We hired the quarterback coach who has no say in Green Bay as our head coach. Yeah. What? That's why you hire these guys. You haven't had a high-profile hire except for Chip. Think of that. And Jeffrey Lurie's entire ownership, the only real big profile hire you've ever had is Chip. Chip sucked it. Okay. Well, it's not my point. Doug wasn't a high-profile hire. Andy Reid wasn't a high-profile hire. Sirianni surely wasn't a high-profile hire. It's a design in the organization. But here you got guys like D going, Nick's got a lot of say in the coordinators because he interviewed a ton of them. Oh. Yeah, because that's been your name. I'm telling you the way it is, not the way you think it is. This is how they've operated. And by the way, it's successful. This is not a rip. This is more of a historical look on how they're where they are today. It's not a rip. But I thought Marcus Haynes today, when he was talking about Sirianni not knowing the culture, been saying this the whole time. He's the third violin player in Howie's orchestra. That's all he is. Is he building up trust with everyone? Absolutely. Is he being more patient? Frank told him, you have to be patient if you want to get ahead there. If you try doing what Tone said, jumping levels, they're going to fire you. Dude, the Philadelphia Eagles would not lose a beat if they fired Nick Sirianni. They wouldn't lose a beat. He knows that. Because if you can fire Doug, you can fire anybody. Seriously, I mean, I'm sorry to tell you that. I hope that doesn't aggravate people. But to me, again, it's the top of the hour here. We're going to go through the divisions. And don't forget also, 5:30, we're going to talk to our friend Bruce Arians. Hurts had a better chance to win than Wentz at time. Andy's claim to fame was being – Sills, it's kind of hard to tell Howie you don't want to humble yourself and go along after Howie spent a couple of seasons banished to the broom closet. Yeah, but Bob, you know what I think Howie has done a great job of? He's put that in a rearview mirror. And he's taken that lesson, and I think he's applied it to where he is now. 17 of the 22 guys, there's no doubt they're doing a better job in the draft. They're doing a better job in front office hiring. They're doing a great job when it comes to assistant coaching hires. They're keeping the right people. And Jeff Stoutland, every guy was fired on that offensive coaching staff except for the offensive line coach. That was by design, not because Sirianni wanted it. Sirianni had no say when he got the job. None. Dude, Nick Sirianni was hired like he was the DB coach, not the head coach. That's why everyone was so shocked with it. It's not a rip. See, the Eagles are the East Coast version. I'll say this to you, Tone. The Eagles are the East Coast version of the Chargers. The difference is the Eagles win and make all the right choices. The Chargers make all the wrong choices, all the wrong decisions, all the wrong firings. Same with the Sixers. The Eagles have kind of the same system. They believed back in the day in A.J. Smith, who was the general manager. He's the guy that decided that he wanted to fire Marty Schottenheimer after a 14-2 season because he thought Marty wasn't important to the process. Well, he was. A.J. was the guy that wanted to play Drew Brees in the final game against Kansas City where he blew his shoulder out. And Marty Schottenheimer didn't want to play him because he wanted to start him next year. He wanted to play Rivers and trade him. Well, A.J. chose wrong. You imagine if the Chargers had kept Drew Brees and traded Rivers, they may have won a Super Bowl, and the team still may have been in San Diego. I just hate when people nitpick at unnecessary narratives to try to make the Eagles look like they're not a high profile. Dude, they're one of the best run organizations. Philadelphia, if this comes off like I'm downplaying anybody or anything and what they're doing, do you know how much time winning, losing, hard lessons that organization has gone through over the 23 years to get to the point where they are at the NovaCare Center today, dude, that takes a lot of work. That's why they're not going to let somebody just come in and fuck it up, man. That's not going to happen. That's why when people, you want to know why also they protected Jalen Carter at that press conference, because it's an indictment that they didn't do their homework. That's an organization, in my opinion, that homework is essential before they make any move. Strategic decision-making has been essential in the success of that organization. It's on display every day. Like I said, if you turned the volume down of the Eagles and then you turned it back up 10 years later, everything they said they were doing has happened. And if you did that to the Sixers, everything Josh Harris said that he was going to do, and you watched it, then you turn the volume up, is a lie. There's a complete difference in what people say at press conferences and what people do on a day-to-day basis and how they put products in front of their fans and put winning teams in front of their fans. There's a difference. And for the record, I think it's harder to motivate a football team than 15 dudes. I think it's harder. The only problem with the NBA, you become like an anchor tied to some of these guys because of the money that's out there, and it's guaranteed. Whereas the NFL could just do this. I'll eat $30 million for 1 year to get that guy out of my building. That's what the Eagles did. They just said, Wentz, get out of here. We're going to pay you. We're going to eat your money because we hate you so bad. You're not taking us down. Okay? People say you pick at useless narratives, but in the same breath complain about the tap dancing in the media. Big Sills is here to make you think. Dude, I'm trying to make you think about how great your team is and how important your GM is and how important Nick is. See, this to me is like the Bulls, the Jordan Bulls. Everyone's got a role. Nick gets a message. It's funny, Nick gets a message every day. This is what we want conveyed to the players. You're either in or you're out. I'm in. No pushback. This is where we're going. We've hired you to be our Pied Piper. Okay. Are you in? Doug went like this. I don't know. That's not how I see it. That's when you start getting pause in the front office. Can you imagine a guy who won a Super Bowl? When you start saying, I want to start doing something different and I don't go down that line and I want to hire this guy and I want to hire that guy. No, I don't like that guy. No, I want to keep this guy. And you start having that in an organization right now where you know why all the tea leaves look good and why the environment's good? Obviously, winning has a lot to do with this. But do you know why this is all going so well? Because everyone's on the same page. The Eagles got to this point after that 4-win season because everyone jumped on board because Howie and the owner put everyone in their right place. Everyone got their chair. Nick's here. And again, Nick got his chair in the orchestra. He's here. He's here. And by the way, getting Jalen. Dude, the Jalen Hurts deal is the cherry on top because you're not searching for a quarterback. You got the quarterback. You got the conference, too. That's sucking. You got the division with the Dallas Cowboys who can't get out of their own way. You got Josh Harris now Josh Harris owning the Commanders versus Daniel Snyder owning the Commanders. I don't know. What's different? Why would I think you're going to get the Commanders right? You haven't done one thing correct in Philly. Go by how he does his up. What are the Devils doing? What are the Devils doing? Now, does Lou Lamoriello still run that thing, or is he somewhere else now? Okay? Where's Lou Lamoriello? I'm just like, The Eagles have spent so much time creating this. Quan goes, like you say, Sills, Howie knee pads? Yeah. Yeah. Go along, get along. Okay? Fly goes, Josh Harris owns a lot of teams. Too bad he doesn't own a lot of championships. Yo, oh, that's right. Lou Lamoriello's in Toronto. There's no coincidence that Lou's got that team turned in the right direction, too, the Toronto Maple Leafs. They haven't won a title since 1967. Lou Lamoriello is one of the absolutely greatest orchestra guys of all time. Glenn Sather and him. You can go down the line. Who's better between those two guys? Sather or him as the best general managers? Maybe Pierre Lacroix. You could probably go down there. Pierre Lacroix was a great general manager when he was running the Avalanche. Ken Holland, when he was running the Maple Leafs, or excuse me, the Detroit Red Wings. So to me, you know, those are some of your greatest general managers. There's an alternative universe. You guys are still talking to me about Brock Purdy? Come on, man. Sills, what organization would you play for, Niners or Eagles? That's a great question, Cosmo. See, Cosmo, for me, probably the Eagles. But if it was the Ed DeBartolo 49ers, it would be clearly the 49ers. Now, Carmen Policy destroyed the team at the end. He was a complete cancer. He wasn't the guy that everybody thought he was. He destroyed the football team and backstabbed Ed DeBartolo and stabbed him in the back along with Dwight Clark. God rest his soul. They stabbed Joe in the back and they stabbed Ed DeBartolo in the back. And then when Policy went to Cleveland, it was a complete shit show. You know, Jimmy Haslam even gave him percentage ownership when he went to Cleveland. He was a horrific general manager. He didn't build that 49er dynasty. It had nothing to do with it. It was three men that had a lot to do with it, okay? Okay, it was John McVay, it was Eddie DeBartolo, and it was Bill Walsh. They were the ones that put the 49er dynasty together. Policy was kind of like a carpetbagger that came in at the very end and was waving his hands and talking loud and telling everybody that he was the guy who built. He didn't build the 49er dynasty. That's not true. He won a Super Bowl, but he didn't build it. And he stabbed Eddie in the back at the end, especially at the owners' meetings when the teams decided to take the team away from him because of the New Orleans fiasco with the governor. Okay? Eddie D lost money in San Francisco. You know, Eddie DeBartolo used to give money to his players and trips if they won Super Bowls and NFC titles. Do you know that still to this day he owns a casino in Wyoming? And every player that ever played with him, all you have to do is get on an airplane. He gives you $1,000 in chips, gives you a free weekend, and they all get together still to this very day on teams that won all those Super Bowls up in Wyoming. Randy Cross goes to it all the time. Anybody who was involved in the 49er organization, he has you come up. All you have to do is get there. And he takes care of everything. $1,000 in chips. You and your wife you get 1,000, she gets 1,000, and you guys get to go and have a great time. He used to fly his team to Hawaii every year, and everybody would get these bonus checks when they showed up Hawaii. NFL stopped that because here's Ronnie Lott getting a $25,000 check at a party in Hawaii at a luau. That's a fact. Okay? That was a fact. Well, yeah, the reason that DeBartolo had the team taken away is because of the shit that Toes did. When Toes was putting up equity of the team, NFL found out that he was putting shares of the team up. That wasn't going to cut it, and that's why Eddie got in trouble with the NFL over all that. Eddie was a great owner. At the same time, the Eagles had Toes. Whew, wow. It's a team who would – listen, so The Niners are a good organization. All right, let me do this. I want to take a look at division winners and wild cards now that free agency. We got still one more date on the calendar, and we still have one more shopping day, as I've been telling you. That's June 1, okay? I want to look at some of the divisions here. Here they are. And I want to do that next. Do me a favor. Don't forget, we got Bruce Arians, senior executive to the Buccaneers and former Super Bowl head coach. We're going to talk to him about Jalen Hurts, RPO. We're going to get a lesson, really, in offense. And we're going to talk to one of the great minds. Remember something. He was also in Pittsburgh where he won 3 Super Bowls as the offensive coordinator. He was the OC in Pittsburgh when they won all them Super Bowls. Was the coach of the year in Indianapolis. Was it 2 teams to Super Bowls? Really a great coach. Borderline Hall of Fame guy. We'll talk to him hour 3, 5:30. Hit the like button. Keep it here on the National Football Show.